Pues buenas tardes a todos. Un placer estar contigo, Ángel. Me complace realmente acogerte porque, bueno, es una charla bastante especial, creo, sobre cómo crear un producto basado en la investigación. Y cuando digo investigación, hablo realmente de una tesis doctoral, porque, Ángel, eres ingeniero superior de telecomunicación, tienes un doctorado en economía enfocado a entender el comportamiento de los usuarios en la adopción del e-commerce y has sido profesor también del Departamento de Administración y Dirección de Empresas de la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. Y si no estoy mal, formaste parte del programa de creación de startups, que al final es la mayor fábrica de creación de empresas en el ámbito universitario en España. Así que nada, cuentas con 12 años de experiencia en investigación y te has unido en Clarity ahí hace 3 años para ser responsable del equipo de producto, pero también del equipo de investigación. Así que nada, para los que no conocen Clarity, es una empresa súper chula que al final proporciona a los inversores un software para optimizar el impacto social y el impacto medioambiental de sus carteras de inversión. Para mí es un ejemplo súper inspirador de una empresa que utiliza la tecnología para hacer nuestra economía más virtuosa, más positiva para la sociedad y el medio ambiente. Así que, nada, con eso me callo, te dejo la palabra y para los que están conectados, os invito también a escribir todas vuestras preguntas y a votar también por las más valiosas con la herramienta Slido, cuyo enlace voy a fijar en el chat, a ver si está ya fijado. Creo que sí. Y podéis pinchar en el enlace, luego seleccionar Sync Difference, donde podéis poner todas vuestras preguntas y al final de la ponencia Ángel contestará las preguntas más votadas. Así que nada, que aprovechen un montón y yo estaré por ahí si necesitáis cualquier cosa.
Genial, Laura, muchísimas gracias y muchísimas gracias a vosotros por la invitación a la charla. I think I need to switch to English because the talk was supposed to be in English. Laura already introduced me. My name is Ángel Agudo. I'm the head of product innovation at Clarity. And we're going to talk about this idea of when product managers meet PhDs and how to make them work together in order to build a digital product, right? So glad to be here and so glad to be some familiar faces that have been in Clarity before, Eduard, Aline, etc. So it's great that you are around as well. So let's go for that. So Laura was giving like a very brief introduction about what Clarity is. I don't know if you have some context. She was describing very briefly, so definitely we want to get this vision about bringing social impact to markets, so providing information regarding how companies are impacting in different contexts on the environment, on the society, regarding governance and beyond. So just the decisions that are made by the financial investors, the professional investors, are driven as well by the decisions regarding the environment and how they are impacting the context and the society. So Clarity was born in 2017, so kind of 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. I joined the company since the very beginning, but it was not that the moment where the idea started, because this comes from an idea that Rebecca Minghella, the founder of Clarity, had like back in 2012 when she was doing her MBA, about thinking how we can put this idea of impact in traditional companies, right? So normally, maybe this is a little bit different now because it's much more common, but at that moment, when people were thinking about impact, they were immediately thinking about NGOs, foundations, these kind of organizations, not really companies. And why not using companies, proper companies, to change the world, to change the way that things are done. And the first focus, if you want to really change things, is to leverage in financial markets. In reality, financial markets are even bigger than real markets, and the impact that you can have changing the way that they make decisions is higher than anything else. So that's why we were focused on applying these ideas to financial markets. Let me give you a brief introduction about what this sustainable investment market is, because maybe most of you don't have context. So just for you to be a little bit more familiar with that. So right now we are in the path of having at least half of all the investments in the world, all the assets under management in the world, being considered as sustainable investment, which is great because it means that there are a lot of awareness, and this awareness is growing really great. And as you can see here, like 34% the last 2 years, and means that more and more assets that are managed consider any kind of environmental, social, or governance dimension, which are like the 3 main dimensions that are considered in the market regarding this general concept of sustainability. What are the key 3 drivers that are moving this industry? So the first one is really connected to risk assessment. So the investors, the traditional investors, in the end, they want to make more money. They want to get more profits out of their investments. So they are using this information in order to better understand companies, which makes a lot of sense because in reality, companies are more and more intangible. They are more leverage on the people, more leverage on how they are treating the environment. So the better you understand these dimensions and how companies manage these dimensions, the better you're going to understand how they can make profits in the future. The second one, which is a great one, is about the social awareness. So people are more interested in understanding where their money goes. And this is great because this is something that even us realized of this when we are hiring. So many people come to Clarity because they really want to have this impact in the world through the jobs that they do. So this is changing dramatically, especially in the new generations. So when the people think about this impact with their investments, beyond risk, what they are trying to understand is the real impact of their investment. So how, with the money that they put on some companies, they are making good in terms of, I don't know, reducing the gender gap, for example, or reducing how the companies are emitting CO2 in the planet, which are great goals. And the third one, of course, is about the regulatory framework. More and more countries are forcing companies to be conscious of this and make decisions just to reduce the footprint that they have in the environment. And as I can very quickly see, so in the comments, as they are treating the society, they are treating, for example, their employees, something that with the COVID crisis has increased a lot, this importance of how the people are managing their employees in these circumstances. And what we do at Clarity? So how we are trying to solve this problem? So first thing, we need to understand Clarity as a tech company. So we try to provide technical solutions for this problem. And we do it in 3 main elements. The first one is regarding the data. So one of the big problems about managing this issue is the lack of data. So it's difficult to have valuable data that could be trustworthy that you can use in order to make those decisions. So we work on putting together data that is reliable, that is comparable, and that follows at least some kind of standards that make them compare one company to another, just to understand what is the best company in some dimensions. The second one, which is very aligned with what we are going to be talking today on the connection between PhDs and PMs, is about the methodologies. One of the problems is the lack of standardization and the lack of common frameworks in order to make these comparisons. So that's why it's really relevant and really important that companies provide frameworks that could be used generally to compare how companies are performing. And the third one, we're talking about technology, we're talking about product managers, product itself. It's about the tool that provides this information to the real users, to the analysts, to the financial investors, to the fund managers that are going to use this information in order to make their decisions. So our goal, our commitment is to provide this transparency. That's why we are Clarity, because this world is not transparent at all right now. Objectivity, and that's why we rely so much on scientific knowledge. We need to build frameworks and methodologies that are leveraged on science, and automation. So the facility for the end user to have an end-to-end platform that let them do these processes smoothly. Maybe this sounded a little bit abstract, so let me put it in a specific example that may be easier to understand for you. So I guess most of you know the Sustainable Development Goals coming from the United Nations, a framework that tries to meet 17 of the most urgent problems of the world and that want to be done or at least solved partially by 2030, based on a specific agenda. So what we are doing is we are getting this framework, which is like a very accepted and general framework. And we have been working on a scientific methodology that tries to measure how the companies are contributing to each of the single objectives or goals. Definitely, this is not simple at all. So a lot of information that we have to put together and a lot of theories just to see how the companies with the activities they do directly or indirectly are contributing to any of these single elements. So that's why we have people in research. The people in research are working on building these methodologies to try to get into numbers or transform into numbers these frameworks. And as a product, what we do is try to transform that into a tool, which is the platform where we put that data and we let the users manipulate that data, do deeper analysis, deep dive in companies, etc., in order to understand these concepts. Well, Laura introduced me very quickly, but I think I can talk about this connection between PhDs and product managers because I feel like kind of in the middle, right? So I have been working on research for several years. I have the context of how PhDs things, how they have been working on dissertations for years. And at the same time, I have had the context of Clarity for these 3 years where I've been working really close to the product and closely and more closer every day, just to see how to transform these ideas into product. So out of these years of experience, I got like 5 key ideas that we have realized are really important to make these things work together. In reality, I have to say that maybe nothing that I say right now is absolutely new for you, but at least we can give you the experience. And I say we because, well, it's me who is speaking, but I think I can speak for the teams with the things that have worked in our case and have made things smoother. And if you have listened to that before, I guess that listening twice is going to make it better. So you ensure that you use these ideas. So the first one is about the targets. And targets for PhDs, for product managers, for product designers are amazingly different. And that means that when they think about the problem, even though you have a common problem, the way that they think about what they need to do for the problem is very different. It's very different. So you have to take this into consideration. I've listened in many cases that people start with, well, let's define the common goals, and that will be all. Whenever we have a common goal, every piece is gonna be in the direction of getting those common goals. But I have to say that that is not true. That doesn't happen that naturally. I gave you this example of a random dissertation title that I found online. This disappearance of traditional, especially courtyard architecture in the Middle East and adaptation of Western styles and city planning in the second part of the 20th century. Sorry, Kuwait example is such a single problem, such a small thing that could be amazingly relevant, amazingly important, but it's only a very small piece. And this is the way PhDs think about problems. So we have a question that normally is very specific, and we try to solve this question as much as we can, making all the changes that we need, but focus on this specific point. However, product managers normally have a different approach, and that's great because we need it. So they try to do this process of zooming out, right? So what the users want is much more general project problem and a different target completely. One of the things that we have been trying is to put things together and try to make the product managers make this effort for the states and the opposite way, right? So we can complement these two targets to get the common target of get product out of that. The second thing is about the message, how people communicate, and definitely they do it very differently. The way that we communicate is the way that we process and structure the information internally. And in many cases, we normally complain about the way that people are communicating, but we don't realize that that is what is inside their minds. So this is, if we want to change how to interact with these people, we need to understand that way of communication. It happens many times. So when we are in a meeting and we put together people that are a specialist on something and people that are product managers or product designers that have a different approach, and we ask, so what is the problem that we are working on? We have like these two different approaches. The specialists, the research people, try to start thinking and communicating about numbers, about details, about different point of views of one small thing, while the others try to think more about, but for what? So we don't worry that much about the single detail, but we need to worry about what are we going to do with this. These different messages are not always easy to align, and that's why we need to take that into consideration. The results of those meetings in many cases is very different from one people to another, and you might believe, well, it's only about how they are communicating, it's not that important, but the truth is not. You have to take care of that, because in reality, the way that they communicate is the way that they think and the way that they are going to be thinking about the problem after that meeting. The third one is the synchronism. I don't know if you have met people that have done their PhD, but they have spent like 3, 4, 5, 6 years of their life working on that. And the outcome that they got, it was like kind of a dissertation and 3 or 4 journal papers, scientific papers that have been published. However, in the context of product management, and I've been listening to some talks before, we are talking about agility, iteration, changing quickly, right? Those timelines are completely different. And we did this from the very beginning. So we needed to adapt the timelines of one team and the timelines of the others. In our case, and I guess this could be the experience of the people that are working on something that is complex, so unless you have it, you cannot build the rest of the product, it's kind of sequential, right? So you start working on the methodology, you start working on whatever you want to provide value with, and then you work on how do you put that in a platform, in a solution, in a tech solution that can be offered to the users. And that's the way we started doing things. However, we realized, one, it was taking a lot of time because it was really difficult for the people that was working on the research to get the final answer that they were looking for, which is the way that they were doing things. So that's why it was important for them to get into this final point. However, for the product managers, they wanted to have something as quick as possible so they could iterate and they could move to the next step of the product, how we can make the product better. How we do things now. So we try to change the way, even though we know that by nature this is sequential, we try to avoid that as much as possible. So we try to put the product and the research from the very beginning, even though we have no idea about the methodology. But we know that the methodology development is going to take time, and we need to iterate as quick as possible. We need to find, even though it's a partial solution, as quick as possible live, so the product people can do their work on the iteration, on the learning, on the feedback from the customers. The third one connects, the fourth one, sorry, connects the three things that we have been talking before, which is the alignment, ensuring that all those things happen. And this is funny because normally when you put, as we are lucky in Clarity, when you put very intelligent people with amazing experience, with amazing knowledge that have been in amazing companies before together, you believe everything is done. So these guys are all of them better than me. So there's nothing that I can do in order to make things better because they are going to be doing great things alone. But as I was saying, so they think about different targets, they communicate differently, they have different timelines in their minds. It's amazingly important to keep this alignment every single second. What I see is that when you talk about the research people, they are always finding the truth behind the question because this is what they have done in their PhDs. So they started with a research question and they were working on whatever measure they needed in order to answer that single question. However, product, even though there's a lot of research and many of the things from research and product might be similar, what they think about is if that is the truth. They don't matter to change the truth, to question about the truth. You need to align those approaches because both are necessary, but both don't naturally align. And the last one is the empathy, which is very easy to say, but very difficult to apply. And this is something that I see quite often. Normally, and that is what I have tried to represent here, you think that, well, if you put these two pieces together, it's going to be okay because they are very good, each of them at what they do. So everything is going to come out of that. However, I see every day that based on all these frameworks, all these mental frameworks, communication frameworks that I've been talking about, people think on their sides. So people don't have this empathy easily about what other people are doing. I see discussions very often about, well, so why the research people, why didn't get this model done? Because they needed to have a final solution. And unless we don't have this final solution, we're not going to be ready for the product side. Or I see people that say, well, why product didn't realize what was the real fit with the customer? So that was the job. Why didn't do it? We need to put people out of their comfort zone to understand what the others do. Inviting, for example, people that work on research with customers' calls, so they realize how difficult it is to talk to the customer in a way that you show like this certainty on your product, but at the same time get feedback, and put product people on the complexity of the problems that the research people does, right? Which is what is going to make them understand how difficult that process is and how easy is to continue thinking that you can improve your model and that you should keep working on that. So in reality, these are 5 things that, as I was saying, so I'm pretty sure that you saw them before, but these are only pieces, only leverages that you can use to go for something that is more important, but much more common, which is about the 5 pieces that create this puzzle about teams, right? If you use them, the experience that we have had in Clarity is that you can put together in teams people that might have very different contexts, very different approaches, but can be closer to what is really relevant to create a great product, which is a great team. Thank you very much. Might have some questions. Laura, here you are.
No, thank you so much. It was very interesting. So yeah, I'm going to read the few questions that had been asked. So the first question is how to conciliate in the same team 2 different rhythms. The researcher's rhythm, which is pretty slow, and the PM fast-paced rhythm with quick test and learn, iterations and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. This is what I was talking about, the synchronism, and they are completely different in the way that they do things, in the way that they think, etc. So what we tried was like to make them work together, even though they somehow start doing things that are not their areas of expertise. So if you let the researchers do themselves alone, they are going to dedicate this time. So they need somehow to work with the product managers to get them convinced that, well, it doesn't matter that this is not perfect. We need some feedback from the client, for example. So instead of waiting until you had the perfect product or the perfect methodology that you have in mind, it's better that we move it to the client to get some feedback and forcing them to get the best of the others to transform the way that they work normally.
Okay, great. So at the end, the researchers are gonna kind of use the same methodologies as product managers. I mean, some of them, I guess. Okay.
I try to show that in these colors with the idea of empathy. They cannot be blocks, even though people tend to, and naturally I do it, tend to defend their place, right? And this is, well, this is my knowledge. Let me hear comfortably because I know what I'm doing. But the reality is, in order to make the result better, everybody be somehow in the place of the other, just to influence a little bit.
Okay. Okay, great. The second question is, if we don't have a PhD or a team of researchers, what would you advise to a PM who has to manage both research and product delivery at the very same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I see in many other product companies. Definitely the research is on the side of the product, because the research is very oriented to getting the best solution or the complexity of the problem in terms of like scientific knowledge, etc. is not that relevant. In the case of Clarity, the problem is that we are working on things that are really, really complex. So we have people that are specialized, I don't know, for example, on CO2 emissions or on water use or waste management. So there's like a big amount of knowledge that is necessary in order to provide a methodology or provide a framework that is viable. If that is not the case, the perfect one could be that the product manager can have both behind the same person, even though it's really important to manage how much time they can dedicate, right? So if you are doing a lot of research, it's difficult that you can focus on some other important topics of the product.
Yeah, that's a big deal, because usually, I mean, most of the time the designers team, the team also takes a little bit of the research tasks. What's happened to let the PM have a little bit of time for other tasks. So, other question en español. ¿Cómo hacer que el equipo de producto pueda hacer un research así, aunque no tengan el background de PhD? Es un poco it's quite the same question at the end. I think
in English, Spanish?
In English, because I think most of the affected are, maybe some of them don't speak Spanish, so we're going to translate it. So how do you do as a product team when you like to do research when you don't have a PhD background? But it's more or less the
yeah, maybe something to add on top of that is that it's really relevant that the people that are maybe called in other companies like product specialists, so they have like the deeper knowledge on the single topic, they have to teach the company about those things, right? So it's amazingly important that the product manager manages the complexity of the product, because otherwise, if they are talking about something that not even the product managers understand, then not the users are going to do it, or not the product is going to be completely aligned on the value that you can provide to the customer, to the end user. So that's why for me, if that is the case, or at least what we have done is trying to create like specific sessions, kickoffs, even creating some documents, internal documents that let the product managers manage the contents that they are working on the solution.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Do you have other, I'm asking to the attendees, do you have other questions? Let's see if someone answers. We have like 1 minute left. Okay. I think it's okay. Let's see. I think that's it. Well, thank you very much, Ángel. Thank you very much, and well, I wish you the best, and we keep like in contact. I'm sure we have tons of things to learn one from the other. So thank you very much for being here, and see you soon.
Thanks to you. Thank you very much for inviting me.